The cameras captured her glow, but never her silence. They captured the symmetry, the smoothness, the precise arrangement of features that seemed too deliberate to be accidental, too flawless to be merely human. Every frame was curated, every cover immortalized, every campaign rehearsed into legend. But the photographs never recorded the stillness of her heart between poses, the tremble of her breath when the lights went dark. That is the tragedy of beauty in the age of obsession. The world devours the image, while the woman dissolves. Christy Turlington, a name whispered in the same breath as Naomi and Linda, carved into the marble pedestal of the supermodel era. She was known as the face of eternity. Editors said her beauty was mathematical, like architecture. Designers called her a living sculpture. The public saw her as untouchable, ageless, infinite. But perfection, like glass, is fragile. And to be worshipped for perfection is to be sentenced to its upkeep. Her face became a currency long before she had the chance to decide how she wanted to spend her own life. Each photograph was both a gift and a theft, the gift of visibility, the theft of identity. And with every shutter click, Christy was invited to step further into an immortality she had not asked for. Pause and look again at those early portraits. There is something uncanny there, a serenity so deep it feels rehearsed, even when she was only 16. The eyes are wide, but guarded. The lips closed, as if they knew the world was already listening too closely. It is the expression of a girl learning the first rule of survival in fashion. Never let them see your fear. Fashion, after all, is a theater of illusions. The 1980s and 90s were its golden stage, an era when supermodels became more than models. They were icons, celebrities, walking brands. They were paid millions not only to wear the clothes but to embody the fantasy. And Christy, with her stillness, her composure, her eternal symmetry, became the fantasy the industry could not let go of. Yet behind the glossy magazine spreads was a quieter story. Christy's perfection was not only celebrated, it was dissected. Her mixed heritage, Salvadoran mother, American father, was rarely spoken of in the press, as if the industry was reluctant to complicate the image of classic, European beauty it had assigned her. The irony is piercing. Her uniqueness was both her crown and her erasure. She was held up as the ideal, while the parts of her story that might have broken that illusion were carefully silenced. What does it mean to be reduced to an ideal? It means the world falls in love with your face, while never asking about your soul. It means your every photograph becomes a mirror for other people's desires, never your own reflection. It means that the applause is deafening, but the loneliness it hides is even louder. And Christy carried that loneliness in silence. No scandals, no outbursts, no headlines of collapse, just the quiet endurance of someone determined to hold her composure while the world watched. Perhaps that is why her story feels less like a headline and more like a confession, less like a rise and fall, and more like a slow unmasking. The industry called her eternal. But eternity is a curse when it is pinned to your face. Skin ages, eyes tire, bones grow weary. Yet the magazines demand the same perfection, again and again, until the woman beneath wonders if she is anything at all without it. The cameras captured her glow, but never her silence. And in that silence lived the real Christy, the girl from Walnut Creek, the daughter of a pilot and an immigrant, the woman who would one day choose purpose over perfection. But in the beginning, all the world saw was the glow. And glow, like all light, eventually fades. Before the flashbulbs, before the runways, before the weight of perfection, there was California. Not the California of red carpets and movie premieres, but a quieter one. Walnut Creek, a town where the evenings were slow, where the mountains folded into the horizon, where the smell of grass carried the sound of crickets. It was a place where a girl could still be a girl, where beauty was not yet a burden, where the silence of a stable was louder than any applause. Christy Turlington grew up in that silence. Her father, Dwayne, was a commercial pilot, a man who lived between earth and sky. He carried the calm of someone who trusted in altitude and distance. Her mother, Maria, came from El Salvador, bringing with her the quiet resilience of migration, the unspoken story of leaving one country to build a life in another. From them, Christy inherited two maps, one of flight, one of survival. And together they shaped the child who would one day be seen, but not always known. She was the middle child, a position that teaches you to negotiate, to listen, to blend when necessary. Unlike some who chase the spotlight, Christy never sought it. She found comfort in the ordinary, in homework, in the smell of her mother's cooking, in the steady companionship of her horse. Riding became her refuge. The saddle beneath her, the reins in her hands, the rhythm of hooves against dirt. It was a language of freedom, a way of speaking without words. The horse did not care about symmetry or elegance. It only cared for trust, and Christy gave it freely. But even then, there was something about her that caught attention. Neighbors would speak of her posture, her quiet grace, the way she carried herself with a poise beyond her years. Not vanity, never that, but a stillness that made people look twice, as if sensing a mystery they couldn't name. California in the late 70s was a place of contrasts. Sun-soaked suburbs, yes, but also the undercurrent of cultural shifts. Immigrant families often walked the tightrope between assimilation and memory. For Christy, that meant moving between two identities. At home, she heard Spanish, ate Salvadoran food, carried her mother's heritage. Outside, she was just another American teenager, navigating the subtle pressures of blending in. Perhaps that is why her beauty carried such duality, familiar and foreign, local and global. It made her both a girl next door and an untouchable vision. But Christy herself did not yet see it. At 14, she was not rehearsing poses in the mirror or dreaming of New York. She was simply a girl on horseback, her jeans dusty, her hair tied back, her skin carrying the sun. If you had asked her then what she wanted, she might have said freedom. Time. A life not yet mapped. And yet, fate does not always wait for readiness. It arrives uninvited, disguised as coincidence. On one of those afternoons, when the California light softened into gold and the air smelled of cut grass, a photographer noticed her. Noticed the way her frame held balance, the way her face seemed already sculpted by shadow and light. In that moment, the ordinary dissolved. The stable became a stage. And Christy's life, once measured in the rhythm of hooves, shifted toward the rhythm of shutters. It is tempting to call it luck. But luck is never innocent. It opens doors, yes, but it also locks them. For Christy, that first encounter was less a door than a contract, one she could not yet read. The irony is almost cruel. The very place that gave her grounding, the California quiet, the horses, the anonymity of suburbia, would be replaced by a world that demanded she never again be unseen. She would soon belong to cameras, to contracts, to the endless machinery of an industry that feeds on youth. But for a brief, fragile moment, she was still just a girl in Walnut Creek. Her mother's daughter, her father's child, her horse's trusted rider. She was not yet Christy Turlington the Muse. She was Christy, the girl who did not know the cost of perfection, not yet. And perhaps that is the most haunting part of her story. The world saw beauty, but what she lost first was the chance to be ordinary. It happened in the kind of moment that never warns you of its permanence. No thunder, no announcement, no drumroll. Just a girl, 14 years old, on horseback in the California sun. The day was ordinary. Jeans dusty from the stable, hair tied back in a careless knot, the smell of leather reins warm beneath her fingers. But the ordinary is often where fate hides. Because someone was watching. Not a neighbor, not a friend, but a man with a camera and an eye trained to see what the rest of the world overlooks. He saw her not as she was, a teenager with the awkwardness of growth still in her frame, but as she could be. A face, a brand, a possibility. Her cheekbones became lines on a blueprint. Her gaze became an idea. And in that instant, Christy Turlington stopped being just a girl on a horse. She became a canvas for projection. To be discovered sounds like a fairy tale. The language of it sparkles, as if someone found treasure buried in plain sight. But discovery always comes with possession. The one who finds decides what the object means. And Christy, still a child, was about to learn how it feels to have her meaning rewritten. The first photographs capture this contradiction. There she is, 14, skin still carrying the softness of childhood. And yet, the lens frames her as timeless, eternal, already woman. That in-between, that fragile moment where innocence meets expectation, is where the industry feasts. It loves the unfinished, because the unfinished can be molded. The modeling world spoke quickly. They said she had classic beauty. Words like timeless and perfect symmetry were whispered around her name. But beneath those praises lay the unspoken message: you are valuable for how you look, not for who you are. And at 14, how could she separate one from the other? Imagine being that young and suddenly belonging to strangers. Her face was no longer simply her own reflection in the bathroom mirror. It was a commodity, a promise to agencies, to designers, to magazines that had not yet even booked her. She was still in school, but contracts were already being discussed. Still feeding horses, still doing homework, yet already packaged as a fantasy. There is something almost cruel about how beauty operates in culture. A boy of 14 might be praised for potential, for strength, for ambition. A girl of 14 is praised for being looked at. Her future is not what she will do, but how she will be seen. Christy, with her wide eyes and sculpted lines, was told she was exceptional. But exceptional for what? For being a mirror of desire she could not yet understand. Her parents hesitated, as parents do. But the tide was strong, and the promise was seductive. Travel, money, opportunity. It all sounded like a gift. No one yet spoke of exhaustion, of exploitation, of the quiet erosion that comes from being told your worth depends on staying beautiful. And so, the girl who had found freedom in the rhythm of hooves now found herself in the rhythm of shutters. Lights hot on her face. Voices instructing her. Chin down, eyes open, don't blink. Already, she was learning how to disappear into stillness, how to offer the illusion of control while everything around her was being orchestrated by others. Those first test shoots are haunting in hindsight. The photographs shimmer with youth, yes, but also with something heavier. The gaze is not entirely innocent, not entirely knowing. It is the gaze of someone standing at the edge of a life she cannot yet imagine, already being asked to step forward. The story could be told as luck, as chance, as the beginning of glamour. But beneath the fairy tale lies the truth. Discovery is rarely a gift. It is a bargain, struck without terms, in which the cost is revealed only years later. Christy Turlington was 14 when the world decided what she was. 14 when her face ceased to be only hers. 14 when beauty became both her crown and her chain. And so began the paradox of her life. The girl who never asked to be seen, made into the face no one could look away from. At 16, most girls are learning to drive, planning dances, writing notes in the margins of schoolbooks. At 16, Christy Turlington packed a suitcase and stepped into New York. The city did not wait for her to arrive. It was already moving, fast, loud, merciless. The taxis screamed yellow. The subways rattled like metal arteries beneath the streets. The towers cut the sky into fragments of glass and steel. For a girl from Walnut Creek, where silence lingered like a second skin, New York was less a city and more a storm. She was still in high school, still tethered to the fragile rituals of adolescence. But after class, she crossed into another world. Studios where the air was hot with the smell of makeup, where strangers tugged at her hair, pinned fabric to her body, and spoke about her as if she were an object on loan. 16. Still a child, yet already a product. The industry called it opportunity. But the truth was hunger. Fashion in the mid-1980s was ravenous, for new faces, for fresh forms of perfection, for girls who could carry the weight of fantasy while still thin enough to look fragile. Christy had what they wanted: symmetry, serenity, silence. She became the still point in a frantic machine. Imagine the dissonance. 1 hour, she is reciting Shakespeare in a classroom. The next, She is standing under searing lights, told to embody desire. Her body, her face, her gaze, all rearranged to fit the mood of a campaign. She was no longer Christy, daughter of Dwayne and Maria. She was the look. And the look belonged to everyone but her. In the photographs of those years, you can almost see the split. The girl still lingers, wide-eyed, careful, a softness not yet erased. But layered over it is composure, the mask of someone learning quickly that the world applauds beauty most when it is silent. That silence became her survival. New York was both a gift and a crucible. Here, she stood on runways she had only glimpsed in magazines, Calvin Klein, Versace, Chanel. Here, her face began to circulate in glossy spreads, in subway posters, in whispered praise from editors who called her the next great muse. But here, too, she learned the loneliness of hotel rooms, the exhaustion of flights that blurred time zones, the constant pressure to look as though she had just stepped out of a dream, even when she was barely awake. 16 is an age of becoming, but for Christy, becoming was dictated by others. Her body was measured, her face scrutinized, her skin compared against impossible ideals. The world spoke about her as though she were ageless, eternal, immune to change. Yet she was still changing, still growing into her own bones, still finding her voice. The irony is almost unbearable. While her peers searched for identity, Christy was asked to erase hers. The city itself mirrored the paradox. New York in the 1980s was decadent and dangerous, a stage for ambition and excess. On one block, the glamour of Fifth Avenue. On another, the shadows of the AIDS crisis, poverty, violence. The fashion world floated above it all, gilded and unflinching. And into this world stepped a 16-year-old who had not yet lived enough to recognize how much was being taken. But Christy carried something with her, a quiet strength, a discipline that kept her centered even as the world spun faster. The daughter of a pilot knew how to hold steady in turbulence. The daughter of an immigrant knew how to adapt in silence. These were not fashion skills, but survival ones. And they kept her intact, even as perfection began its slow demand. At 16, she became a citizen of two worlds, the private world of girlhood, fragile, fleeting, and the public world of image, eternal, relentless. The line between them blurred until only the photographs remained. Christy Turlington moved to New York as a girl. The city turned her into a muse. But the cost of that transformation was already written in the shadows, a silence that no camera could capture, a weight no runway could reveal. And in that silence, the girl who once smelled of horses was learning how to disappear behind her own perfection.